I still remember that day with a clarity that surprises me even now, as if the world had pressed pause just to let me feel every second, every sound, every shifting shadow of that moment. The sun was lowering slowly, stretching its golden fingers across the walls of the living room, spilling a soft orange and pink glow that made everything seem calm and quiet, almost peaceful, though inside me, I felt nothing but a growing, hollow ache that I could not place. I had been sitting on the old floral couch, the one with the worn cushions that had molded perfectly to my shape over the years, sipping tea that had already gone lukewarm, and thinking, foolishly, that everything was normal, that life was just moving along in its usual way, that nothing could disturb the rhythm of my small, familiar world. And yet, in that stillness, the sound of her voice cut through everything like glass, crisp, deliberate, and icy in its clarity. "Mom, maybe you should go. It's better if you leave." The words were calm, almost polite, but underneath them there was a chill that wrapped around my heart, squeezing it tighter than any storm ever could. I froze in a way that surprised me, my hands gripping the edge of the teacup, my knuckles whitening, my breath catching in my throat as if the air itself had turned heavy. For a long moment, I couldn't even hear the meaning of the words. All I saw was Daniel, my son, standing there silently beside her, his eyes downcast, shoulders tense, lips pressed together as if caught between saying something and saying nothing, caught between the love he owed me and the loyalty he had chosen to give someone else. And in that instant, something inside me shifted, a tiny spark of comprehension that grew rapidly into a flame of sorrow. I smiled. I don't know why I smiled, whether it was a way to protect myself or a quiet surrender, but it was a smile that carried no joy, only the fragile mask of composure. Not because I wasn't hurt, oh, I was hurt in ways that words cannot capture. My chest ached, my stomach churned, and my eyes pricked with tears that I refused to let fall. But smiling felt like the only thing I could do, the only small rebellion I had left against a truth I was not ready to face. Years of giving, years of loving, years of small, unnoticed sacrifices, all of it seemed to converge into that single moment. I had cooked his favorite meals, tended to his scraped knees, listened to his endless stories, stayed up nights worrying, and celebrated silently when he achieved things I could barely understand, all in the quiet hope that the bond between mother and child would remain unbroken, unshakable, untouchable. And now, standing before me, letting someone else dictate the terms of our relationship, was the boy I had raised, the boy whose dreams I had nurtured, whose fears I had tried to soothe, whose laughter had been my music for decades. And he was letting it go. He was letting me go. That was the moment it hit me with an unbearable weight. I had already lost him, though he was still standing there in the room, his presence more like a shadow than a comfort. I sat there, teacup still trembling slightly in my hands, staring at them both, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background, feeling the soft creak of the floorboards underfoot, and letting the words settle into my chest like stones I could not remove. My heart ached, but amidst the pain, a strange, sharp clarity emerged, like the piercing cold of dawn cutting through fog. Life has a way of revealing its truths when we are least prepared, when we have grown comfortable in our illusions of permanence, when we have believed that love, no matter how gentle, cannot be stolen from us. And in that quiet living room, bathed in the dying light of day, I understood something I had not wanted to believe: love cannot be forced. People cannot be held to roles they no longer wish to play. And sometimes, the ones we have nurtured, the ones we have poured ourselves into, change in ways we cannot anticipate, slipping away quietly while we are still searching for signs of their presence. I remember the way my eyes flicked to the window, seeing the last hints of sunlight disappearing beyond the horizon, feeling as though the warmth of the day had left me alongside it, and realizing, with the hollow, sinking certainty of a heart breaking quietly in its cage, that the bond one had thought unbreakable had already fractured. And yet, even as the sorrow pressed down on me, even as the tears threatened to spill, there was a strange, subtle sense of understanding. I understood that I could not bend the will of another, could not summon the loyalty or love I longed for, could not force a son to remain my son in the way I had always imagined. Sometimes, the hardest lesson in life is learning that letting go does not mean defeat. It means truth. It means acceptance. And so I sat, breathing slowly, letting the silence fill the room, letting the pink and orange of the evening sky seep into my skin, letting the ache of loss settle around me, and allowing myself, for the first time in years, to see clearly what had happened, to face it, to name it. I had already lost my son, not to distance or accident, not to misunderstanding or quarrel, but to choice, to a quiet shift in the tides of love and loyalty that I could neither control nor reverse. And in that moment, beneath the gentle fading light of that evening, with nothing but the quiet hum of the world around me, I allowed myself to feel it fully, to acknowledge the grief, the disbelief, the heartbreak, and yet also, perhaps for the first time, a glimmer of peace that comes from knowing the truth, even when it is far more painful than any comfort could ever be. Let me tell you about my family, or at least, the family I thought I had, the one I had built in my heart over decades of patience, care, and unwavering hope, a family I believed was held together by invisible threads of love that no argument, no misunderstanding, and no distance could ever sever. My son, Daniel, was always my pride, the one I had watched grow from a tiny, fragile baby with a wail that could pierce the night, into a young man full of potential, laughter, and dreams. I can still remember the first time I held him in my arms, that soft, warm bundle with tiny fingers that wrapped themselves around mine as if sensing the promise I was making, the promise that I would always protect him, always nurture him, always be there for him no matter what storms life threw our way. And I tried, oh, how I tried, every single day, in ways both small and large, in ways that often went unnoticed, from staying up late to make sure he was safe and comfortable, to guiding him through school projects, helping him with homework, celebrating his smallest victories with exaggerated cheer, and wiping away tears he didn't even realize I saw, carrying the weight of his worries and dreams as if they were my own, because, in a sense, they were. We were not a perfect family, far from it, with disagreements that sometimes spiraled into arguments and frustrations that bubbled over in moments I wished I could take back, but I always believed that the foundation of our relationship, the bond between mother and child, was unshakable, that love was a force so strong that it could endure any storm, any misstep, any harsh word or moment of silence. Then came Emily, his wife, bright, ambitious, polite, and poised in ways that initially drew me in, someone I wanted to like, someone I wanted to welcome into our family with open arms because I loved my son and I wanted him to be happy, and when he was happy, my heart swelled with a quiet, unspoken joy. For a while, everything seemed fine. We had family dinners that were warm and lively, birthdays that sparkled with candles and laughter, and small trips that felt like weaving threads of connection, memories I stored carefully in my mind, imagining a life that was harmonious, full of mutual respect and love, a life where the family we were becoming would be something beautiful, enduring, and comforting. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, little shifts began to take shape, almost like shadows stretching across sunlight, barely noticeable but persistent, small comments here, subtle dismissals there, the way she would roll her eyes ever so slightly when I spoke, the way she would correct me on trivial matters with a smile that felt more sharp than sweet, the way conversations that once flowed naturally now felt like walking on fragile glass, careful not to break something I did not even know was fragile. I didn't notice it at first, or perhaps I refused to notice, my heart wanting to believe in the goodness of her, in the bond that I had nurtured between my son and me, in the idea that love, my love, could bridge any gap, heal any discomfort, smooth over any tension. I told myself that it was normal, that all families have adjustments, that all relationships have friction, and I believed with every fiber of my being that love could fix everything, that the warmth I had invested in this family would eventually be mirrored back to me in respect, in care, in gratitude, and that my place in my son's heart was permanent and unshakable. I watched, often silently, as subtle dynamics shifted, as tones changed in conversation, as laughter grew less frequent, as polite smiles replaced the warmth that used to make the house feel like a safe harbor. I noticed the way Daniel sometimes paused, hesitant, before speaking, the way he glanced at her when I said something, almost as if he were weighing my words against hers, the way decisions that once felt collaborative now seemed dictated by her, the way I felt, more and more, as though I were becoming an observer in the life I had built, rather than a participant, a presence that was slowly fading into the background, unnoticed, unneeded, or worse, unwelcome. And yet, through it all, I clung to hope, to the unshakable belief that the love I had for my son, and that he had once shown me in abundance, would be enough to weather this, would be enough to remind him, every day, of the bond that could not be broken, that no matter the shifts, no matter the tensions, he would always see me, always hear me, always know that I loved him completely, unconditionally, and endlessly, as only a mother can. That was the essence of my life, of the family I had imagined, of the love I believed was unbreakable, a love so quietly and persistently given that I thought it could survive anything, and yet, even as I held on to this belief with all the strength of my heart, I began to sense, in fleeting moments, in shadows of her gaze, in pauses that were too long, in warmth that was now measured, that nothing, not even the deepest love, could guarantee permanence, that sometimes hearts, even those closest to us, change in ways we cannot see, and that sometimes, we are left holding on to memories of love while the living reality shifts in silence, almost imperceptibly, until one day, we awaken to a truth too heavy to ignore, a truth that begins here, in these quiet, subtle moments of shifting dynamics, that would eventually lead me to the heartbreak I could not yet imagine, the realization that the family I thought I had, the unshakable bond one had nurtured for decades, was no longer the one I lived in, and that life, in its quiet, relentless way, was teaching me the first of many painful lessons about love, loyalty, and the fragile, shifting nature of human hearts. The first time I felt a real distance between us, a distance I had never imagined, it was so small, so almost invisible, that I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened, that perhaps I had misheard, misread, or imagined it in a moment of fatigue, yet the memory lingers, vivid and sharp, because it was the first crack in the foundation I had so carefully built for decades. It was during one of our family dinners, a quiet evening that should have been ordinary, filled with the soft clatter of cutlery against plates and the faint hum of conversation, when Emily, with that polite but unmistakably critical tone, said, "Mom, maybe you shouldn't touch the dishes that way. It's too old-fashioned." I laughed it off, or at least I tried, letting a soft, almost forced smile curve my lips while I placed the plates back on the counter more carefully than before, but inside, a small, sharp pain took root, like a thorn I couldn't remove. I told myself it was nothing, that she hadn't meant it, that maybe it was just a comment, a passing thought, but the seed of doubt had been planted, tiny and subtle, and as the days passed, that seed began to grow into something I could no longer ignore. Over the months, the cracks multiplied in ways so gentle at first that I almost missed them, a slightly harsh remark about the way I cooked, a comment on the clothes I wore, the way I spoke, the way I moved around my own home, the way I existed in the space I had always thought of as my own. I excused each comment at first, telling myself she was stressed, that perhaps she didn't mean it that way, that I was imagining malice where there was none, that love and patience could smooth over these rough edges, and yet, the accumulation of these tiny dismissals began to weigh on me, pressing against my heart, making the warmth of our home feel colder, the laughter less frequent, the conversations less spontaneous and more measured, more careful, as if one wrong word could trigger tension or disapproval. And then the comments became sharper, more direct, unmistakably aimed at me, as if I had crossed some invisible boundary I never knew existed. "You don't understand our life anymore, Mom," she would say with a calm finality that left no room for argument, no room for explanation, as though my life experience, my history with my son, my decades of love and care, were irrelevant in the face of a new reality she was crafting, one in which I was not meant to belong. "We have our own way of doing things," she added sometimes, almost casually, almost smiling, but the words landed like a weight pressing on my chest, pushing me further and further away from the intimacy and connection I had always believed defined our family. And Daniel, oh, Daniel, my son, the boy I had raised with sleepless nights, scraped knees, birthday surprises, and unspoken prayers, he didn't defend me. Not once. He would stand there, quiet, caught in a tension I could see in his eyes but that he could not resolve, nodding when she spoke, looking embarrassed when I tried to meet his gaze, sometimes staying silent, his lips pressed together in a way that made me feel both sorrow and frustration in equal measure, as though he had chosen to remain neutral in the battle between his wife and his mother, a choice that slowly felt like a betrayal to my heart. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, to ask why he allowed this to happen, why he let the woman I had welcomed into our home, into our lives, dictate the terms of my place in my own family, why he let me be pushed aside, why he didn't stand up for me, why the warmth and love we once shared could be replaced with silence and avoidance, a cold politeness that slowly became the norm. And the worst part, the truly unbearable part, was the quiet, the absence of the laughter, the gentle teasing, the shared memories that had once filled the rooms with warmth and light. Conversations became formal, polite, measured, almost hollow, as if every word needed to be weighed for fear of conflict, for fear of judgment, for fear of being wrong in the presence of someone who no longer valued my presence. It was subtle at first, these changes, almost imperceptible, a shift in tone, a glance that lingered too long, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, but over time, it accumulated, like water wearing away at stone, until it became undeniable, until it became impossible to ignore that the home I had known, the family I had loved and nurtured, was no longer the sanctuary it had once been, and I was no longer an integral part of it. It was as if I was still there, physically, sharing the same space, eating the same meals, celebrating the same occasions, but slowly, imperceptibly, I was becoming invisible, a shadow that was seen but not acknowledged, present but not welcomed, a figure whose love and care were taken for granted, whose heartache was unnoticed, whose voice, once so central to the warmth of the family, now seemed optional, even cumbersome. And with every passing day, every exchanged glance, every small, cutting remark, the distance grew, a silent wall building between us brick by brick, until I could feel it not only in the way they spoke to me, but in the way I felt about myself, the way I questioned my worth, the way I remembered every sacrifice I had made, every tear I had wiped, every meal I had prepared with love, and wondered if it had ever mattered at all. I tried, as much as I could, to bridge the gap, to keep smiling, to keep participating, to continue loving quietly and faithfully, hoping that eventually, the warmth would return, that the laughter would come back, that the bond one had built with Daniel would reassert itself, but the harder I tried, the more distant they seemed, the more invisible I became, and the more I understood, with a sinking heaviness in my chest, that the foundation I had relied upon was cracking in ways I could no longer mend, that the love I had poured into my son, into my family, into the home we shared, was now being tested in a way that left me powerless, small, and achingly alone, even when surrounded by those I had once thought closest to me. I will never, ever forget the day everything changed, the day that began like so many others, with quiet routines and the comforting hum of familiarity, and yet ended with a wound so deep it seemed as though it had cut straight through my very soul. That morning, I had risen early, as I always did, preparing breakfast with care, laying out the plates just so, boiling the tea to the perfect temperature, arranging the food in a way that I knew would please my son, hoping, perhaps naively, that the simple act of love and service could maintain the fragile harmony of our home. I tidied the kitchen, wiped down the counters, swept the floor, and adjusted the cushions on the chairs, my hands moving almost automatically, as if the motions themselves could shield me from the storm I did not yet know was coming. I waited patiently for Daniel to come down, listening to the soft creak of the stairs, expecting the familiar sound of his footsteps, the cheerful greeting, the warmth of the ordinary that we had shared for so long, and I imagined our breakfast conversation, the small, everyday chatter that had always been a comforting rhythm in our lives, a rhythm that had once felt like proof that love, patience, and care could hold everything together. But when I finally walked into the kitchen, the scene that greeted me stopped me cold, froze me in a way that no words can truly capture. There she was, Emily, standing by the stove, her posture straight, her expression cold, precise, deliberate, like a statue carved from ice, her eyes fixed on me with a calmness that carried no warmth, no humor, no hint of the lightheartedness that once existed in our interactions. And then I heard the words, as sharp and final as a knife slicing through the air, "Mom, you need to leave." I paused, my body caught between the urge to move and the fear of what moving might bring, my mind racing with 1,000 conflicting thoughts, 1,000 possible ways to respond, 1,000 desperate pleas that I could no longer voice. I wanted to argue, to cry, to beg my son to stand up for me, to speak the words I could not, to remind him of all the nights I had stayed awake with him, all the scraped knees I had bandaged, all the birthdays I had celebrated with care and love, all the tears I had wiped, all the laughter I had shared and fostered, all the love I had poured into him since the moment he was born, and to ask him why that was not enough. Why it was not enough to protect my place in his life, in his heart, in our home. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I turned my gaze toward Daniel, searching for some sign, some flicker of understanding, some hesitation, some loyalty that would reassure me that all was not lost, that the bond we shared, the bond that had once been unbreakable, still had some thread holding it together. And he looked away. He did not meet my eyes. He did not speak. He did not offer a word of protest, a murmur of comfort, a flicker of acknowledgement, or even a fleeting glance of guilt. He looked away. Silence stretched between us like a chasm, vast and impossible to cross, filled with the weight of memories that suddenly seemed irrelevant, distant, meaningless, and unbearable all at once. In that silence, my chest tightened, my vision blurred, and my mind was flooded by a cascade of memories, memories I had carried quietly and faithfully for years, memories that had once been the very essence of our bond, the nights I had stayed awake with him as a newborn, rocking him gently in my arms while tears of exhaustion and worry blurred my vision, the early school mornings when I prepared his lunch and backpack, trying to make every detail perfect so that he would feel supported and loved, the countless projects I had helped him with, the essays I had proofread, the science experiments that went horribly wrong but left him laughing anyway, the birthdays, each one celebrated with care, with small surprises and quiet touches that I thought mattered, with candles blown out on cakes I had baked with love, the tears I had wiped, tears of frustration, disappointment, or heartbreak, the way I had held him close and whispered assurances that he was never alone, the laughter we had shared, quiet giggles under blankets during thunderstorms, silly jokes that only we found funny, the comfort of small, ordinary moments that felt like the backbone of our lives together, and now, in the span of a single moment, it all felt irrelevant, as though the weight of years of care and sacrifice meant nothing, as though my love, so deep and unwavering, could be dismissed with the quiet acceptance of a son who had chosen silence over solidarity, who had chosen absence over defense, who had, without a single word, allowed the barrier between us to solidify, brick by brick, until it became a wall that I could not scale, a wall that I could not break through, no matter how desperately I wanted to. That moment was brutal, not because of her words alone, not because of the coldness I faced, but because of his silence, because of the absence of the boy who had once held my hand tightly when he was scared, who had leaned into me for comfort when the world felt too large, who had laughed with me, cried with me, and trusted me implicitly. In that pause, in that unbearable quiet, I understood something I had been afraid to accept, something my heart had hinted at in whispers but that I had never faced fully. My son, my own child, the one I had raised, nurtured, and loved unconditionally, had already chosen her over me, had already allowed the bond we shared to be diminished, had already walked a step away from the mother who had given him everything, and in that instant, I felt the full weight of loss, a grief so sharp it seemed to pierce through time itself, a grief that was not just for that moment but for every memory, every effort, every ounce of love that had been taken for granted. And in the midst of my tears that threatened to fall, in the ache that spread like fire through my chest, I realized the truth that I had tried to deny. I had already lost him. I had already lost the son I had imagined, the son who once looked at me with trust, love, and dependency, the son whose heart I had thought would always be connected to mine. That day was the day I understood that loss is not always marked by absence, that betrayal is not always loud, that heartbreak can arrive quietly, in the stillness of a kitchen bathed in morning light, in the silence of a child who has grown into a man yet refuses to meet the gaze of the mother who raised him, and that sometimes, the hardest lessons of life are the ones that arrive without warning, leaving us standing in the rubble of everything we once believed unshakable, holding only memories, and forced to confront the cruel truth that love, however deep and enduring, cannot always guarantee loyalty, cannot always prevent distance, and cannot always save us from the heartbreak of realizing that someone we have cherished with every fiber of our being has quietly, irrevocably, chosen another path, leaving us behind to grieve the child we once knew, even while he stands right there before our eyes. After that day, life settled into a rhythm I had never imagined, a rhythm of quiet mornings and long, lonely evenings, where the house seemed simultaneously too full and yet unbearably empty, filled with echoes of laughter that once was and the soft, persistent ache of absence that could not be ignored. I stopped arguing, not out of defeat, but because I realized that words, no matter how carefully chosen, could not bridge the divide that had formed between me and my son, between me and the family I had once thought unshakable. I stopped trying to convince anyone to love me, to notice me, to defend my place in a home I had cared for and nurtured for decades. Instead, I simply existed, moving through my days with a quiet, measured attention to small tasks that once brought comfort, like tending to the plants that had survived my absent-minded care for years, brewing tea just the way I liked it, folding laundry with precision and thought, preparing meals with the same care I had always carried, and in those moments, I began to notice the subtle ways life could still be gentle, still offer fragments of peace, even when the heart felt bruised and the soul felt heavy. And yes, I cried, many times, sometimes silently at night while the world slept, sometimes while staring out of the window at a world that continued moving, indifferent to my sorrow, the tears a mixture of grief, frustration, and the realization that love, no matter how deep, sometimes cannot prevent the distance that grows between hearts. But I also thought, endlessly and quietly, about my life, about the love I had poured into Daniel, about the countless hours, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices made with a steady hand and an open heart, and about the limits of family, about the painful truth that even the deepest bonds can shift, can fade, and that sometimes the most courageous act is not to fight endlessly against that change, but to let go with grace, to release the expectation that love can always be controlled or guaranteed. Little by little, I began to focus on myself, slowly rebuilding a sense of identity that was not defined solely by my roles as mother or mother-in-law, recognizing the person I was beyond the titles, beyond the expectations, beyond the love that had been both my pride and my sorrow. I found solace in small things, the crisp air on a walk in the park, the warmth of a cup of tea in my hands while sunlight streamed through the windows, the comfort of a phone call with a friend who listened without judgment, without interruption, without expectation, the quiet satisfaction of completing a task well, the soft hum of music in an empty room, the gentle turning of pages in a book that had waited for my attention. In these moments, I remembered who I was, the woman I had been before motherhood, before the long years of dedication and sacrifice, before my identity had become so entwined with the presence and love of another, and I began to see that I could exist fully, even in the absence of reciprocity, that I could find joy, even if it was small and quiet, that I could nurture myself with the same care I had once reserved entirely for my family. And then, slowly, a truth crystallized in my mind, a truth that felt like a soft illumination after long darkness. Losing someone, even someone you have loved so fiercely, does not mean that the love you gave was wasted, that the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the tears, the laughter, the unwavering devotion were meaningless. It does not mean that you failed. It only means that life has its own way of teaching lessons that are often painful but ultimately necessary, lessons about acceptance, about resilience, about self-worth, about understanding that love is not always tied to presence or validation, that attachment does not guarantee permanence, and that sometimes the deepest expression of care is learning to protect your heart, even when it hurts, even when the world seems cold and distant. I learned to love from a distance, to hold the memories of my son and our shared past gently, without needing them to be acknowledged or returned, to treasure the moments we had and release the moments that could not be reclaimed, to smile quietly at the echoes of joy and grief intertwined, to speak softly to myself with kindness and patience, to let time, reflection, and small acts of self-compassion become the balm for wounds that could not be erased by argument or tears. I began to protect my heart, not by closing it off entirely, but by understanding its limits, by recognizing that love is both precious and fragile, that it can be given freely and wholly even when it is not returned in the way we hope, and that self-respect is not diminished by another's choices, by silence, by absence, or by rejection. In this quiet aftermath, I discovered a new strength, a gentle, enduring strength born from grief, reflection, and the courage to continue, to move forward with dignity and grace, to embrace life in its small wonders, to seek connection where it is offered, and to release the burden of expecting from others what only we can give ourselves. I learned that peace is not loud, that healing does not happen overnight, that resilience is cultivated in moments of stillness, and that love, even when it cannot be shared in the way we long for, remains a gift, a force that shapes us, teaches us, and carries us forward, even when the world has shifted in ways we cannot control. And in the quiet spaces of my days, in the softness of morning light, in the warmth of tea in my hands, in the gentle turning of pages, in the solitary walks beneath trees whose branches sway like whispers, I came to understand that life continues, that hearts can mend, that love can endure silently, patiently, and faithfully within us, and that even in loss, even in heartbreak, there is room for hope, room for joy, room for self-discovery, room for a future that is shaped not only by the presence of others, but by the depth of care we give ourselves, the gentle acknowledgement of our own worth, and the courage to keep our hearts open, tender, and alive, even when they have been broken.